Welcome, everyone. It's No Makeup Wednesdays here at Goddess University. So we are here with a guest for today, Dr. Tanginika-Simone. I hope I'm saying that halfway correctly. We
Cuascud.
lovingly call Cuascud.
Yes.
Cuascud. And I'll ask the meaning of that later. But we lovingly call her Dr. Tangi, and she is joining us from Dallas, Texas today. And I wanted to welcome Dr. Tangi and our other Dallas University faculty members that have joined the call. Welcome, Dr. Tangi.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thrilled to have you. Well, I got introduced to you just recently, and I was excited to share your work. And you have come to us from your home, which is Puerto Rico. And I wanted to hear a little bit about your background as a sexologist and how you came to your field.
Well, I was kind of born a sexologist. I have always been very interested in sex. Not only the physiological aspect of sex, but also what people do with sex, how people think about sex, how people feel about sex, sex in the context of relationships, sex as it is felt by individuals. I was always the go-to person to ask sexual questions. I kind of had that, I guess, quality. People felt comfortable asking me about sex. I educated myself about sex and reproductive biology. And even when before I started having sex, did I lose anybody?
You're here. You cut off the last bit. If you had finished after school.
Oh, okay. Well, I decided to go back to school and study it, and make it my profession because it has been my calling. And I said that I did that after writing about sexual health for various publications. I did have another doctorate degree, and I worked in higher education before that since 1990. So I've always been an educator at heart, and I decided that empowering people sexually and giving people sexual information was something that I wanted to do. So now I'm educator of sex.
And you started with saying, "Look, I've always been a sexologist." That's an interesting mindset. I think most of us think of us as always been a mommy or, always been a wife. But how did you come to really having an understanding of, I guess, the coaching aspect of it? And you talked about being able to talk to people about it. How did that start for you?
Well, I think my first experience about sex was seeing the telenovelas, the Spanish soap operas,
Yeah.
and people kissed passionately, and then in the next episode, someone was pregnant. So I remember asking myself, how does that happen? And I remember also being very interested in doing what they were doing and like those passionate kisses and touching. And although I didn't have a great understanding about my own sexuality back then and no one talked about it, just that exposure was very appealing to me. And I remember having my first experience kissing another girl when I was 5, and it was a little neighbor, and we convened and we agreed to kiss. We didn't really kiss, but the whole aspect of it was so interesting. And after that, I was just very, very interested. I had an early development. I developed puberty at 5, so my hormones were raging since very early on. So that also probably played a role on me seeing things differently probably than the average girl, because I grew up very fast. So I had a lot of estrogen in me and a little bit of testosterone and progesterone to really make me aware of my own sexuality. And since I grew up so fast, everybody was very interested in my body. I was very curvaceous. I mean, you can imagine a 6, 7 year old with the body that I have now. So that was monumental. And I drew a lot of attention to myself, although I didn't understand why. But I liked it, and I always felt very comfortable with my body. And I always felt that, in spite of the messages that I was getting that sex was bad and sex was sinful and something not to talk about, etc., I never felt that that was true. I always kind of felt like, oh, I that is not so. And so I challenged that. I didn't have sex until I was almost 23, but I did educate myself on sexual matters. I read a lot. I read everything that I could put my hands on regarding sexuality and sex and sex stories, and I found it fascinating. So I always had this positive attitude towards sex. I also remember people talking negatively about homosexuality, for instance, and me challenging that from the time I was a girl and saying, like, why so? I mean, if a person is a person and they are good people, why is it bad? So I always had this mind frame of being a sex positive person.
Uh, and tell me about Puerto Rico. Is that back in the Bible goes here in Dallas that it wasn't easy growing up being sex positive or sexually aware. So how was that received in your community? Was that a difficult challenge, or did you have the support?
It posed some quandaries at times. I wanted to be a nun, so a
And not
nun out of all things.
like unlike all girls, of course. That's all we were told.
Exactly. So I wanted to be a nun, and so I preserved my virginity, number one, because I wanted to be a nun, but number two, because I feared my mother. And so I thought if I had sex and got pregnant, that was the worst thing that could happen to you. So for me, actually, sex was not as scary as getting pregnant before getting married, and that's why I avoided it. But also because I educated myself on it. And living in Puerto Rico is actually more, it's actually better than living in Texas as far as sex goes. The society is more open about it, and we're very sexual people. And I'm not saying that is the paradise of sex, but definitely better attitudes towards sex than here in Texas. I have to say that. So living in Puerto Rico, I mean, it was kind of an interesting place because, in one hand, again, I was the typical Latina with lots of curves and very attractive to the people because of my curves and my body. But in the other hand, virginity and messages of virginity were very important. So I had to reconciliate those notions within myself before I became sexually active.
Now, one of the things we talked about earlier was about what men need from women. And I wanted to introduce that topic, but let me add a little segue there because as women, we have had those pressures of our mothers and the Catholic Church giving us directions for our sexuality. But let's talk a little bit about some of those expectations we have from mothers and those restrictions that kind of sets the framework for me about what what do men evolve to and what will they need as they mature.
Well, I mean, for women, we know, I think we're very aware um, about the expectations for women as far as sex goes and as far as what to do, what not to do. We have a set list of what's and what nots. And that is very clear to us. And we have fought against it, and we have made strides on the world of sex. to, again, reconciliate those notions. Should I be a slut? Should I be a nun? And how can I be both, probably,
Right,
or
right.
one versus the other? But for men, I think the path has been easy on some aspects, but very difficult on others. Been easy as far as the access and the permission towards living their sexuality in an open way. However, it has left them stranded emotionally and with a lot of questions and with a lot of confusion and with a lot of suffering. And I see that in my practice. So I have learned to appreciate men and see them differently because of my work. And I see the struggles of men, and I know the heart of men. And I have to say that I think it's time that we wake up to that reality, and we need to pay attention to men and pay attention to the kind of men that we're raising as mothers as well. What is the kind of man that we want to have? I am the mother of a male child, and so I want him to be aware of his sexuality, but I don't want him to suffer those struggles that men suffer now. So it is an interesting time. We need to be aware not only of our own sexuality, but also about what role men play in our lives.
Okay, so let's talk about those roles. We see them as father, husband, lover, ex-lover, friend, and maybe friend with benefits. Is that a fair um, assessment to give men? Or fair set of categories, or are we putting them into boxes?
We are putting them into boxes, and we have a love-hate relationship with men, unfortunately. We see them, yes, as providers, or we expect them to be providers. We expect them to be superheroes in every way, good fathers, good husbands, good friends with benefits, good lovers. We expect them to know it all, and we do not give them a lot of credit as far as their intelligence. I have to say that for myself. Um, and we have negative talk about men. We are always talking like, oh, men, that's all men, or men are like this, men are like that. And I think we do not give them the proper credit. And men fear that intimacy and that proximity to women because of all the barriers that we've put on our own selves and sexuality towards them. I mean, we expect so many things from them, but then emotionally we don't allow them to get closer and to open up and to be vulnerable. If they're vulnerable, we see them as weak. And if we see them as weak, then we don't appreciate that. We can either take advantage of that, or that can detour us from them. And it leaves them with a lot of confusion. They're very confused about their role right now.
Hmm.
Hi, Dr. Tanji. I wanted to ask a question. I've always thought about this difference between men and women in terms of number. And I don't know if it's globally or if it's only in certain places, but it just seems to me that there is significantly more women than men. And I'm wondering if, I mean, if that is a fact, then that would play certainly a big role on it. What do you think about that? What do you think about their just population numbers, just sheer numbers?
Well, that's an interesting question. For instance, let me bring that into context. I studied in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, and there the population of women is significantly higher than men. Usually it's about a 48, 52, 51, 49. But in the Virgin Islands, there's a lot more women than men. Therefore, women are very, very competitive for the attention of men. And in the other hand, men have access to more women than women have access to men. So men have the advantage of numbers. I mean, that, say that there's 7 wives for each husband, or 7 women for each man. It's actually kind of true in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So it creates this almost cannibalism among women competing for the attention of men, and
Hmm.
competing for having their share and expressing their sexuality. I mean, with men when they are outnumbered so significantly. So it turns women into more of the aggressors almost, and the aggressors in the way that they become more aggressive and more dominant, and they take more of an active role on the pursuit than probably on other places when men have more of an advantage as far as numbers. So I think it definitely plays a role on our own behavior,
Hmm.
and I think history plays a role in our own behavior. I mean, we have fought for our right. We have always, I mean, I'm not denying that women haven't had struggles. We have struggled with power. We have struggled with the imbalance of and the unfairness of the world of men versus the world of women, and I'm not denying that. But we have taken the other role of, okay, well, now I'm going to manipulate you with what you want the most, with it, which is my pussy. So women have men kind of like on a string. It's like, okay, now you see it, now you don't. And it's like the song, Can't Touch This. So we're always playing this little game, Can't Touch This. And we show it, but then we don't give you access to it. Or maybe a little bit, and then I retire again. So it's kind of a game, and men are just salivating around us. And we know we hold that power. So again, we see I've seen the difference in context in which that number plays a big difference. But I think essentially and intrinsically we tend to behave kind of the same across the cultures. That's definitely not taking into consideration those cultures in which women are still very, very oppressed. So not taking those contexts into consideration for this conversation, definitely, women have learned what their advantages are.
Right. And I would say women may understand their advantages in the courting cycle, but a lot of times we don't feel, no, maybe not, the power throughout the whole relationship. I think I've been married 15 years, and I'm still going, I'm not feeling so powerful when I can put my foot down and use my anger or my frustration to get something done, but I'm not using my sexual energy or persuasive or charm. And I wonder if that's a mistake on my part, so I should be using more charm or more sugar than vinegar to get the stuff done I want to get done. But when you use the term power, I'm going, ooh, I should be using that more judiciously, or respectfully, or intentionally. So I'm a little more curious about that and finding my power and get power here.
Well, women have the power, or have a lot of power in their relationship, but there's a difference between power and empowerment. Empowerment requires for you to be aware, and sometimes people have power, but they are not aware that they have it. So even in the instances, and I see this in my practice, even in the instances in which women are not empowered, they do hold the power because they want that thing that men want the most. And so
Yeah.
they're always kind of dancing in that game. Women determine whether or not there's going to be sex in the bedroom. And that's probably, within the context of a relationship, one of the biggest powers that women have. I'm not talking about empowerment, I'm talking about power. So men will do or won't do depending on their access to that what they want the most. And they act upon that. And women also either subconsciously or consciously act upon it. They know that if they say no, oh, you looked at me funny this morning, you're not going to get any pussy tonight. Oh, well, you didn't do the dishes, you're not going to get any pussy tonight. And they punish men with pussy. We give the access or deny the access. And that's a game that's always played in the bedroom. And that's the power that women have. And even when women think that they're so oppressed and they're so, they don't exert their power, they're not aware of it, they're aware that the relationship or that sexual relationship happens if they so decide. And men, again, are always playing this game. It's like, did I do good today? And it goes back to it's more profound than that. It goes back to men wanting to please the mother, so they don't want the wrath of the woman in the bedroom, and it's like, did I do good today? Am I getting my reward tonight? No, you left something undone, so no pussy tonight. Try again tomorrow. And it's a continuum, and that's one of the main complaints that men have here in my practice. Is like, well, she's unwilling. Anything that happens, anything can put an obstacle to that sexual relationship to happen. And we have to understand something. Women seek and find intimacy, or I should say, need intimacy in order to feel sexually connected. And men find that intimacy through sexual connection. So it's a very hard game to conciliate. It's a very hard game to balance, because if women feel that they're not connected in any way, let that be because they have a headache or because they don't feel that their men find them attractive or whatever, they cannot really give themselves 100% on that sexual relationship. But for men, that sexual relationship is their way. That's the vessel. That's the means for them to actually achieve that intimacy. And they do feel closer, and they do feel more connected, and they do feel that they have that bonding with their partner when they have sex with their partner. They feel happier, they feel better, they feel more empowered, they're on a bliss and a cloud. And for women, they have to be on the cloud to be able to have sex. So
Right.
so the game is like never ending. It's always a pursuit. But women, I believe, and again through my practice I see it, that they use this for their advantage much more than men. Men are almost like begging for this connection and begging for the intimacy to happen through sex. And women are like, well, contingent to if you take care of this, take care of that, are a good provider, etc., etc. Took a shower, smell clean, shave, etc. So we have many more conditions on men to connect with them than men have with us or towards us.
I don't know why I mean, I guess it's a power in some relationships, but I always figured, I mean, I've never been big on that role, go sleep on the couch, no, I'm not having sex with you because of this or that. I just figured if I was a guy, I'd be like, okay, and just go someplace else. Like, don't a lot of men just go someplace else?
Yes, they do. Yes,
Mm.
they do. I have to say that the extracurricular activities of men are very prevalent. And, I'm the confidant.
Power. Where's the power for the
Well,
yeah.
but they do it, but they do want to connect with their wives. They are
Mm.
getting the body rubs with happy endings. They're getting the phone sex. They're getting the escorts. They're getting, they having the mistress. But they long for the connection with their wives. It's not a substitute. It's kind of a band-aid for them. And
Mm.
even when they come here and say, yes, I do this, I do that, but oh my goodness, I just want to fuck my wife. And it
Mm.
drives them insane because that's the one thing that they want, and that's the one thing that they're not getting. So, and they will stay probably in that game indefinitely if other conditions are not present. They will stay there because they will always be on that pursuit. And again, it's not a substitute. They long for it. I wrote an article months ago about the sexual fantasies of men, and there are people who study these things and what are the sexual fantasies. And of course, everybody's like, well, the number one fantasy of men is to have a threesome, of course. Actually, that was the number two fantasy of men. The number one fantasy of men was their wives, their partners, their partners in committed relationships. They wanted to do all these things, all these other 9 fantasies with their partners. They wanted their partners to dress the nurse. They wanted their partners to be the stranger that they picked up on an alley. They wanted their partners to be part of the threesome. They wanted their partners to be the dominant. They wanted their partners to peg them. But they wanted their partner to be the actor, the actress on it. And that came to a surprise for everybody. that men wanted to have that intimacy and that sexual connection with their wives. And I'm not surprised because I get the confirmation every day for that fact.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the other 9 fantasies that men have. Can you run off some of those for us?
Oh, well, men, men want to be dominated. So they want to be, yes, they want a woman to wear a strap on and penetrate them from behind. That's one of the fantasies from men. And I do have a lot of men here, and that's definitely one of their fantasies. They want their partners to engage in anal play. So they want their partners to engage in anal play and give them anal pleasure. That is a very common one. And it's again about the power. They want the woman to wear the penis, and for them to kind of disconnect and be vulnerable and be like, oh, okay, well, take me if I must, and kind of let go of that superhero type of stereotypical view of them. So that's one of the fantasies that men have. And men want to also be taken advantage of. They want a seductress that can come and say, so hey, and kind of allure them into their sexual ways and make them, quote unquote, do sexual things that they never thought of. So I actually got a phone call this morning from a potential client, and what he wants is like, is this weird? I want to be kind of the slut of this dominant woman, and I want her to make me do a lot of bad things and things that and I was like, yeah. It's just, he was like, is that common? I said, yeah, I've had that in my practice, men asking like, yeah, this is what I want. So, but again, they want their partners to actually play that role. They want to pick up a total stranger and say, hey, get in the car and make them have sex with them. So that's another one. And the rape fantasies are also very prevalent among men. Not necessarily they want to go out there and rape somebody, but they want that dominance. And they want to feel powerful and that they can take a woman and dominate her in the bedroom. And again, women, their partners can take on that part. I know I volunteer anytime for that. So those are some of the common fantasies. And again, that's threesome. That's in the mind of probably 90% of men. But some men actually, surprisingly, some men are not interested. But there's a lot of men with the sexual fantasy of the threesome and the group sex in their minds. So those are some of them.
The dominant woman, I hear a lot of those fantasies myself. I'm happy to apply them. It's amusing to me, though, to hear a man say, force me to be a slut, or force me to have a bisexual relationship with another man. And that always kind of rubbed me the wrong way when I was, I don't need to be forced. I understand the control of wanting to let somebody else give direction so I don't have to make all the decisions. But that force part was always just something, as a woman, it just did not make sense to me. Yet I can understand rape play, but I don't know, it's the same thing. It's just give me the rape play kind of scenario from there.
It can be, it can be a therapeutic process for them. Without knowing the particular background, and everybody could have a different reason for their sexual fantasies. And as a sexologist, we do not pathologize any sexual fantasy. However, when there are instances in which men want to be forced, for instance, to do something, it could be a way not only for them to let go of the power and that power role that they always have to exert, but also probably therapeutically deal with things from their past and things that they had no control over in the past, as far as probably some negative encounters with sex. And now, as an adult, having the choice and making the decision to volunteer to now be or play the victim role in a controlled and safe environment. So you never know what's in the background of that fantasy. And usually there are some vulnerabilities involved that come from long time ago, and sometimes they don't even know that they have them. I've been asked, help me understand why I want to be dominated and why I want to be penetrated or whatever. And before I even go there, I ask them, why is it important to you to understand that? Because it can open up, a can of worms that probably that person is not ready to dig into. So sometimes telling that person, well, it's normal. A lot of people have it. It's really not important where it comes from. If you want to give yourself permission to live that fantasy, just know that there are ways in which you can do that safely, and you can be vulnerable with someone who is going to appreciate that and who's going to actually take that in their hands and provide you with a good experience. But if you want to dig deeper into understanding why, et cetera, we can do that kind of work. But, sometimes we may never know where that came from, and sometimes it can come from very dark places in the past. And as far as men dominating women, it can also come from the same experience. It can come from a situation in which they felt overpowered by women. And I've been asked by men, like, help me be more dominant. I want to be more dominant because I don't know how to. And when I ask why, because that's one of the questions we always have to ask. Why do you want to know? Why is it so important to you so I can direct you in the right path? They say, well, it's kind of, that's what is expected of me. And when I tell them, well, there's a lot of women that would be very, very good with your type of sexuality being more passive, then they kind of let go of that anxiety of becoming the dominant one. But we have to be very careful, and I am very careful to not look at anybody's fantasies as something that I need to analyze. If they want to analyze it to understand them, then that's great. If they don't, and they just have the fantasy and they just kind of want the permission giving from me, I say, well, go ahead. And they're happy about it. And they're like, okay, merry go lucky, I'll go and live my fantasy out loud. And thank you so much. And that's it. That's all they know. And that's all they need.
Do you find that, what's the difference between women's fantasies and men's fantasies? Are there similarities? Like, you gave some of men's fantasies. Do women's fantasies, are they the same?
They have a lot of correlation between one and the other. Yes, one of the women's fantasies is to wear the penis. Mm-hmm. So and men want to be pegged, exactly. And I love wearing the penis. And so yeah, I know there's something very, very arousing and powerful about a man kneeling and sucking your fake dick. It's exhilarating. It's very exciting. And so yes, I like to wear the penis in their relationship every once in a while. And so a lot of women have that fantasy to just wear that strap on and feel that power. I do not know, and I'm not going to say that it comes from, what Freud says or said, that we had penis envy. A lot of people have contested that theory. I don't necessarily think that I have penis envy because I have a tiny penis. It's just that men have a bigger penis than I do. But anyways, but that's one of the fantasies that women have. Women want to be taken advantage of. So the teacher, coach type of fantasy, that's very common in women. The lesbian fantasy is very common among women, and probably I would say that's the one of the most common ones. Maybe that's number one, number two for women. Mm-hmm. Even when women don't understand it, and even when women would never act on it, a lot of women have lesbian fantasies. And of course, they come to me. They're like, "Oh my God, am I a lesbian?" Because I'm thinking about another woman or other women while I'm masturbating. And I'm like, "No, that's kind of everybody." And people who have analyzed this fantasy, they say that it's a way of us like having sex with ourselves, because we know that nobody can touch our bodies the way we do. So it's a way of us like kind of having that out of body experience with our own selves. And so we have that in our thoughts. So those are probably three of the most common fantasies for women. Being taken advantage of. The rape fantasy is very, very, very common in women. Being forced into sexual acts. And again, it comes probably from our background, not being given permission to perform sexually. So when we kind of relinquish that control and say, oh, he made me, I'm not responsible because I was raped. And of course, we don't want to be raped. We want that fantasy in the context of the bedroom in a safe environment if we choose to live it out loud. I always like to make the distinction that fantasies are not desires necessarily. Fantasies stay in our heads, and anything goes in our heads. One of the favorite phrases that I know comes from one of my professors, Dr. Jerry Zentara in San Francisco, and he says they cannot put you in jail for your thoughts. So yes, in your thoughts everything goes. But I have to say for myself, about 95% of the fantasies, I don't want them out of my head. I use them during masturbation, during sex, during play. Maybe we talk about it. Maybe we voice it out. Maybe, we talk about fucking and this and that or here and there. And I mean, whatever. But if I want to do it, it requires another energy. And so sexual fantasies tend to stay in the head. And sexual desires are those that you actually have the drive and motivation to go outside of your head and dress up and seek a partner and go to the street and pick up somebody, et cetera, et cetera. So I have to say that most fantasies are just fantasies and sexual thoughts that we have in the safety of our own brains and heads. Nobody has to know about them, and we feel very safe about them. And sexual desires are those that, require the negotiation, the planning, the agreement, calling somebody, hey, I have this fantasy. Are you a willing participant? So, you bring this, I bring that, we come together, et cetera, et cetera. So it requires a different kind of energy, the sexual desire, to make that fantasy a reality.
I wonder about myself. If I think when I'm in my sexual play, I'm totally cut off and my body is working all the time, or working only. But I use.
Oh, I lost your audio.
And women about their sexual fantasies, and when I come up with a great, I have had the opportunity to talk to men and women about their sexual fantasy and their good ones. I just make a note of them so I can do it myself later. And like, ooh, that's a good one. Put in the box. So let me ask about your work, and tell us about your website and what is the primary focus of your work.
Well, the primary focus of my work is really education. I educate people sexually.
The name of the website. Tell us the website.
It's Dr. Tangi, thesexdoctor.com.
Dr. Tangi, thesexdoctor.com. Awesome.
So if you search the Sex Doctor, then that's me. That's my website. And so that's kind of how I view my practice, is education. I do treat sexual dysfunctions of men primarily. So my practice is about 99% men. And it's men with premature ejaculation, or erectile dysfunction, or delayed ejaculation, and other intimacy concerns, men who want to expand their sexual repertoire, or that they want to feel like more adequate lovers, or that they want to be more empowered in the bedroom, that they want to accept their sexuality, etc., etc. So men would have different reasons to come to me, but most of them will have a sexual issue that they want to get solved. So that's primarily what I do. And through my work, there's a lot of education involved. There's a lot of questions that just pop up, because up until the time when they find me, they haven't felt that they can talk to anybody about their sexual concerns, whether it's a sexual functioning problem like premature ejaculation, or just sexual questions like, am I normal? Is what I'm feeling normal? is, me dressing up like a cheerleader and wanting to be pegged in a normal fantasy. So easing the anxieties of men. And I've found that men are more open to get their problems solved than women. And it goes back to our initial conversation about that power. Women can live happily ever after, or unhappily ever after, indeed, with their sexual concerns and never have to take any action about it. But men, quite the contrary, when men have a sexual issue, especially that shows like premature ejaculation or erectile dysfunction, they can only make so many excuses for themselves. And it's really tied, their penis is tied to their identity. So when the penis is not working, then they come to me because they really want to get it solved. And I take that with a lot of compassion, and I love the work that I do with men. But men also want to be touched. They want to be held. They want to be appreciated. They want to be loved and pampered, and they want to feel like someone cares about them. So my practice is pleasure-based and compassion-driven. So it doesn't matter what the story is. I look at it with the utmost objectivity, but definitely the utmost compassion. And every man that comes here is going to be appreciated. And it doesn't matter if I'm dealing with a sexual dysfunction or if the goal is to enhance sexual skills. We are going to have fun doing what we're set out to do. So those are my tenets. The tenets of my practice is fun, fun, fun. So it's pleasure-based and compassion-driven. So that's basically what I do mostly. But I'm also a sexual health writer. So any study that you see out there, things that come up sexually, I am always the recipient of those pieces of information, and I write about them. I have an audience, probably mostly of women, and women do have a lot of questions, but they tend to inbox or send an email or something like that. They're not necessarily the ones that come to the office to get it solved. They want a question, they want an answer. Women do go to seminars and workshops, and that's another aspect of what I do. And they will go on groups, and they feel more comfortable sharing with groups. Men are very hesitant to be in groups because they don't even want to be seen coming into my place when they have sexual concerns, because they don't want to find their buddy from sports bar or their brother from church or something like that, and as evidence that they're having a problem with their penis. So yeah, mostly men. In practice, as far as hands-on, and a lot of education with women, one-on-one in workshops and through my writings. So that's basically what my work is.
Right. And it comes back to the women, because we are a group of women who have gathered together in a group to talk about men's needs, but as well as women's needs, because I know you said your primary work is with men. But what are you working on with women, and what do you find most women are into you about?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, because you got caught off a little bit?
Sure. Finding most women are coming to you about.
Women, what are women coming to me about?
Right. What issues are women bringing to you?
Women, the number one complaint of women is, I haven't had an orgasm. And it's not necessarily that they haven't had an orgasm. Some women have had many orgasms, but they haven't known that they had them. Mm-hmm. I, for instance, had a lady here, it was probably early fall, and she was like, I have never had an orgasm. And actually she came referred by her husband, who was here. And he was like, well, the problem is that my wife, I have never been able to give her an orgasm, because we have this notion that men should give us orgasms and women should receive them. So he was desperate. He was like, we've been married for this long, and I have never been able to make her orgasm. And so I told him, well, that is very good that you're coming here for help. However, I believe that you have done everything that you can do to provide your wife with ample opportunities for her to orgasm, but it's not your thing to give her. It doesn't come in a box. And so anyway, so he said, well, I want her to come and see you. So she did. And as we were doing the session, and I was manipulating her, and I was, inserted my fingers, and we worked with a vibrator and a dildo and everything. I felt her orgasming inside, and she didn't feel it. So that's true for a lot of women. They're able to reach orgasm. I think there's a myth out there that women are not able to reach orgasm, and there are some numbers out there like 40% of women have never felt an orgasm. I suspect that a lot of them have, but they do not know that they have experienced that. So when I start talking with women about what an orgasm is and what does it feel like and everything, sometimes they're like, well, maybe I have, but they don't know what that feels for them. So that's the number one concern of women, the elusive orgasm. Number two, a lot of women want to learn to ejaculate, and I think that's great. I ejaculate, and it is an awesome feeling, but I don't want any woman to feel like because I do not ejaculate or squirt or whatever, I am missing out on something, or I am less than or of. So a lot of women write because they want to learn how to ejaculate, but I tell them relaxing is the number one component of that ejaculation. So if you want to learn how to squirt, you have to relax about it.
What is the benefit of squirt other than it's a great party trick, or it's not a party trick, but it's kind of like fireworks display for the orgasm? Is there any other benefit?
It just feels different. At least for me, it feels different than the clitoral orgasm. And yes, it is great. It's kind of like that display. It's like, okay, I squirted all over you, and men feel very, very proud because they feel that they made you do that. And although in my case, like I'm giving it to myself because I know exactly what to do to achieve that. But it's kind of fun and it's messy, and I love messy sex anyway. So, I think that sex shouldn't be clean. It should be very messy and wet. And so for me, it's like, okay, great. We had a very, very messy session, and now we have to wash all the sheets, and it's awesome. But other than that, I tell women, do not stress about it. I mean, if you haven't squirted in your life, it's not like you are going to, oh my God, like I can't be on my deathbed and be like, I never squirted in my life. So do it if you can, and if you haven't, then that's it's okay too. So that's a number two concern. And then number three is because their men are doing or not doing something. So women are like, well, but he doesn't do this, or he doesn't satisfy me, or he doesn't do this or that. And usually it's very evident to me that women have to do a lot of work with self-confidence and self-esteem when they come to me with, oh, he doesn't give me, or he doesn't do this. It's like, well, have you communicated that efficiently and effectively? Have you told him about it? Have you had a conversation about it? And usually they haven't. Usually they're like, no, isn't he supposed to know? And I'm like, no, men are not supposed to know at all. So you're supposed to take control and take charge and communicate. So those are probably the three top concerns that women have. What men haven't done or do or they don't do, the ejaculation and the orgasm.
Stephanie had a question? But your mic may not be on, Stephanie. Let me turn it off. There you go. How about now? Go ahead, Steph. Stephanie, hear me? We can, you keep turning the mic. I just unmuted you to try again. No. What is the question? And I'll.
I see a lot of mics that are off.
Yeah, there's Rebecca's is off. Katie's mic is off. Bethany should be on. But
I have a question for you, Dr. Tangi.
Oh, yes.
I am a young single female, and I've been finding, being single in the city, so to speak, there's a double standard with women who are sexually open and having mutual friends with benefits or multiple play partners, that there is a stigma that men can have sex with many women that are single, and that makes them a stud. But when a woman has sex with many men, does it make them a slut?
And that stigma has been there for ages. It's not a new stigma. It is still there. I think we're easing up on some of those stereotypes and awarding women a little more freedoms. I think what will require for us to change that mentality is, number one, for us as women to be more open about our sexuality. Because yes, I can be deemed as a slut because I have multiple sex partners, but believe me, the woman sitting next to me, she wishes she had multiple partners. So, and if I say, well, I do have multiple partners, for instance, I say, well, I'm polyamorous. I'm kind of polyromantic. That's my phrase. Because I don't necessarily have a lot of relationships, but in my head, I do have a lot of relationships, and I fall in love with a lot of people. And so I tell people, well, I'm polyromantic, and I believe more in the polyamorous type of lifestyle. And I say that in Texas, and this is a very conservative place. And when I say it, there's always a lot of people that go like, oh my God, really? Can you tell me more about that? And they're interested, they want to know. Because they want somebody to break the ice, and if you're thinking it, someone else is thinking it, but we need to be open about it. If we are closed about it, and I'm not saying, necessarily publish it in the newspaper, but if you are authentic, and that's what I always say, we have to live our sexuality authentically. If we live it authentically and we're assertive and we're honest with ourselves, and we are self-confident, and we say, well, this is my right, and as a woman, I choose to have multiple partners, and someone may choose differently, and I don't judge them. I do not accept that those negative judgments have an effect on me. Then more women will feel empowered to come out and say, well, me too, and raise their hands and burn their bras. And we have to, as I said in the beginning, we have to raise our men as young children to appreciate women differently. When we play the game that, well, some certain quality of women are good to get married, but others are good for play, and we say to kids, well, how many girlfriends do you have? But we never ask the girls, how many boyfriends do you have? So those messages are ingrained in our society, and we keep perpetuating them. And so it is kind of a never-ending cycle. We have eased up on some of those stereotypes, but not a whole lot. And we need to relax, and we need to stop that double standard from the crib. So if you're asking my son how many girlfriends does he have, then you have to ask my daughter how many boyfriends does she have. And if you're asking my son how many pussies he's going to get with that pee-pee, you have to ask my daughter how many penises she's going to get with that pussy. So, but we don't want to do that. We want to create the virtuous female, and we want to award men that freedom, and that has to change. We have to make those changes in every piece of conversation that we have. As women, I've felt, and I've seen this, that we're like, well, you know, the double standard, but then we call someone else a slut. So we can't do that. We cannot talk derogatively about other women who are doing certain things or women of certain caliber if we want this double standard to change. So yes, there is a double standard. Going back to your question, it's not going to change overnight. But we need to just be honest and say, well, that's a double standard. Are you calling man slut or whatever name there is for it, you know, man whore, that man who has a lot of girlfriends? Why are you calling me that, and why you are not calling him that? So I am going to play on equal condition to men. But I found a lot of men who are okay playing that part and playing that game, who are like, you know, I have the same right as women, and women have the same rights as me. So I think it's shifting and it's changing, but we have to be very, very honest, and we have to be very gutsy and very courageous to come out as polyamorous people, as open relationship people, and just say what we are and live it respectfully and ethically.
Well, and that's the whole thing about ethics. Like, this double standard comes from making your daughter look like a good potential bride for a couple of goats and a cow for dowry. It's not biblical times anymore. And even in the biblical state of Texas, I too, being sex positive and having visited recently, shared with my family. And it might have been awkward at first, but then they were asking me questions. And that's really where the knowledge comes from, is like sharing. And if you just closet yourself as a sex positive person, it's the same thing as repressing yourself as a homosexual. It's that primal urge, and why should we deny it?
I totally agree with you, totally, 100%. And as you said, it's true. Someone else is interested, and someone else has thought about that idea as being a good idea. So when you say, well, I'm this, then someone else comes out of the closet. I remember, and this is probably just an illustration to go to your point, when Ricky Martin came out back in, when was that, 2010, the end of 2010. And he came out, and then he was blamed because Ricky Martin came out, and then all these kids wanted to come out of the closet. And it was not that all these kids came out of the closet because Ricky Martin turned them into being gay. It was just that when he did it, then a lot of them said, well, since he did it, I'm going to do it too. I'm out of the closet. So everybody, you know, a lot of kids came out of the closet, and especially Hispanic kids who would have probably never had that incentive if Ricky Martin would have not done it before them. So it is very important for us to make strides, to be the trailblazers and to be those carrying the torch. And some of us are called to do that, and I admire you for being open with your sexuality, because you will create that change. You will have an effect on others. And yes, some people may call you a slut, but you know what? I call myself a sacred prostitute. So you know, I said, well, I'm a whore. Before anybody else says it, I'm going to say it. And I'm okay with being a sacred prostitute. I'm okay with being a whore. I think that life is more fun this way anyway. But I'm respectful of everybody's sexuality. So if you don't want to live my sexuality, I'm not making you. But I'm telling you, I have the right of being who I am. So you are exerting the right of being who you are, and that is great, and that will affect positive change, for sure. For sure.
Thank you.
Did we lose Phyllis?
Can anyone hear me yet?
I can hear you.
Oh, yay, yay. I think I fixed it. All right, yay. I have a question.
Yes.
As someone from the older generation who has struggled with social conditioning about, you know, the slut thing that you were just talking about, but it's even more severe in years past, how do we throw off those internalized negative beliefs to explore our sexuality fully? How do you work with women who present that issue?
Well, I have to say that I have a lot of compassion for women in general and men in general, but especially I know that the socialization and the conditioning that you're mentioning is very, very hard to dispel. So I'm not saying that it's an easy task. And bringing an illustration to my point, there is a 23-year-old colleague of mine. She's a sexologist, and she's the youngest sexologist that I know. And she comes from this generation of, now. And we were in class last year in San Francisco, and we were talking about sexting and meeting people online and sending pictures and how guarded we are. If I send a picture of my boob, it's like, I'm very careful with, who do I send this picture to, no face, et cetera, et cetera. We take all these precautions. And she said, and we were talking, all these 40, plus year olds, we were talking about the dating and the sexting and the picture sending via phone. And she was very cute. She said, oh my goodness, all of you people, you are like so concerned about where your picture is going and where your picture has been. So my generation, like, I don't know how many pictures of my pussy there are out there circulating right now. We meet, we exchange phone numbers, and there comes a picture of the penis and the pussy. So, we're not concerned about, where this is going to go, how is it going to be used. She's much more relaxed even than we are. For me to send a picture of, again, a boob, it takes monumental work and assessment. And so I laughed, and I was like, wow, that generational gap is very wide. And the changes, you can see them across generations. So going back to your question, our generation is probably a tier, or I don't know, a step forward, if there's such a thing. But you can also come out and experiment, and it requires for you to let go of the old notions, but educate yourself. That's number one. Educate yourself. The more you read and the more you know, and the more you are aware of what's out there, I felt that for me that has helped. It's like, oh, so there are other people who have the same sexuality, or there are other people that want to do this, or there are other people that have this sexual fantasy. So the more you expand on your knowledge, the more empowered you feel to live that sexuality out loud. And then taking baby steps. I'm not going to tell you, go to a nudist camp and go and be naked, for one full day, if that's something that really frightens you. But probably, start with coming out of the shower and be naked in your bedroom for 5 minutes. Take just little steps. And then when you know that the world didn't stop turning because you were naked in your bedroom for 5 minutes, then probably next time you do it for 10 or 15. And whatever that is that it's in your head, whether it's having more than one partner, for instance, we'll have a partner and maybe share with that partner. I kind of tend to go more towards being in an open relationship. And if nobody has a heart attack, then there you have your validation. It's like, okay, nobody died, everybody's okay. If that person doesn't accept that, then you can move on to the next partner, et cetera, et cetera. So whatever we're talking about, I like to know the comfort zone for that person and kind of take baby steps for behavioral change to happen. I may not be of the radical change of, well, you have to go and march in the gay pride in San Francisco, next year. You just came out of the closet, or come out of of the closet in national TV. So, baby steps. When you know that something that you didn't cause anybody to die and everybody remained alive and well, you will be empowered to kind of take the next step. And then same thing happens, and then the next and the next. And then when you look back, you see how far you've come. That's when you realize that you had the power all along to change your circumstances. But for some people, that can happen very quickly and swiftly, and they can do it very dramatically. But for other people, it just takes time. But I encourage you to just do it. Do not refrain yourself from doing it just because your mother taught you that it was a bad idea. Um, I have to say though that in practice, I know that there's a lot of people talking about parents when their parents pass away, for instance, that's when they feel free to be this or that. That's when they're like, okay, that part of my past has been severed, and now I don't have anybody who can judge me so severely, because it goes back to that judgment of the parents and us fearing that rejection from the parents. And when we understand that that cannot happen, that's when we actually can move forward and change and be whatever it is that it's in our head that we should be. I don't know if I've answered your question. I don't have a framework as far as what was your specific idea, but in general terms, that's my approach: is to understand it better and then help the person just take a baby step at a time if that's more comfortable for them.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So I guess everybody else is frozen. Okay, there's Rebecca.
Yes, I think that we're having some audio difficulty.
Yeah, and I see Phyllis frozen in my screen. So the connection may have stopped for her. Okay, I see her moving.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us, Dr. Tangi. And what's next for you in your practice?
Well, in my practice, definitely keep empowering men and reach more women. And I think now I have to tell women what I've learned about men. I think I needed to learn what those needs of men were or are, and I needed to develop that compassion for men. And now it's time that women know too, so we can all live in harmony. I think we have to be done with the fighting and the chasing and this dance in which we never get to really dance with each other. And we need to create more harmony in those relationships between men and women. So I think that's next for me, and keep expanding my practice. I want to thank Phyllis and all of you for joining, or for allowing me to join, actually, and for having me as a guest. And I hope that we can have many more conversations in the future. And thank you so much. Visit my website, Dr. Tangi, thesexdoctor.com, for more information about me and for questions. I do answer questions from people, and I love that interaction one-on-one with the audience. So I encourage everybody to do that. Thank you so much, and I'll be seeing you shortly in the future. Happy New Year, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Tangi, and have a wonderful rest of your 2014, and thank you for being a groundbreaking pioneer for sexuality and preaching that good notion to communicate in your partnerships and honor each other.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you.